Today is Thursday, February 11th, 2021, and you're watching the Daily Mix TV. Hi, my name is Sean Patrick Hillman, and that's right, I'm back. Yes, it's been a little over 9 months since our last stream, and a lot of people have been reaching out to me, asking me why we weren't doing it anymore, what was going on. Folks, there was nothing going on. As a matter of fact, with everything that was happening last May, we decided to pull the plug on the Daily Mix TV temporarily because, frankly, I personally felt that the last thing anyone wanted to talk about was brands and business and marketing and pop culture, because they wanted to hear about the virus. They wanted to hear about a solution, a cure, a vaccine, all of those things. So flash forward almost a year, and we've made some progress, thankfully. Hopefully the pace picks up and we can get to some semblance of herd immunity in this country a little sooner than later. Now, why am I coming back now? Why are we bringing the Daily Mix TV back today? Well, the reality is that in the last 2 weeks alone, we have seen far too many ignorant marketing campaigns, product releases that just make no sense whatsoever. And then, of course, news stories that people just flat out don't understand. So we couldn't continue remaining offline. And to be honest with you, having been doing this as long as I have, I miss the thrill of the kill of a story. So, speaking of which, I wanted to say thank you to all those folks who kept reaching out to me, emailing me, calling, texting, asking, when's the Daily Mix TV coming back? As well as those who wrote seeking marketing advice. I am so glad that so many of you have gotten something out of this effort. The Daily Mix TV is a passion project, and it's because we just love helping others to understand the ins and outs of business, to learn about marketing and what it really is, to understand the choices that companies make when they're releasing a product, or how pop culture and certainly the human condition affect those decisions. So enough with the yabba yabba. Let's get on to today's first story. Aunt Jemima's got a new name, the Pearl Milling Company. Parent company PepsiCo unveiled the rebranding this past Tuesday after announcing last year that they would be dropping the 131-year-old name and logo. Now, all of this comes as a result of allegations of racial injustice and violence, as well as the narrative that racism is inherent to every walk of life. Now, look, I'm not going to touch any of that with a 10-foot pole because we try to stay out of politics at the Daily Mix TV, but I will say at the end of this story a little more about this issue. Now, as to the Pearl Milling Company, the new look will hit shelves in June, but the question is, if it's going to hit in June and they're already starting to receive significant backlash from the rebranding, the question is, was this the right decision for PepsiCo to make? Now, accusations of being too woke to pandering and everything in between, the Twitterverse went absolutely postal on Tuesday. So again, did Pepsi do the right thing? The answer is yes and no. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but hear me out. Because of the clear ties to slavery with the brand image and its history, even right down to how the original spokesmodel was paid, the answer is yes. But I don't believe that changing the name and iconography is the solution, so here's where no comes in. We need to educate people about what happened and stop ignoring the lessons that history is trying to teach us. Cancel culture is dangerous, folks. Make no mistake about this. And it's for a lot of reasons. The most important being it's overly reactive, it's usually without fact because it's passion-driven, and it's unjust. Now, at the end of the day, as somebody who's done this a lot in his career in terms of rebranding, brand refreshes, all of those things, pop culture always plays a role in how that happens or why it happens or when it happens. Now, with cancel culture and everything else that's going on, all of that played into the reality that PepsiCo looked at and said, hey, these issues are trending. We need to react because people are calling out our brand on its roots. All right. Instead of spending millions upon millions of dollars and wasting a lot of time going through a rebranding effort, I would have actually advised the client, that being PepsiCo or that being the brand managers at Aunt Jemima, I would have said to them, guys, at the end of the day, you need to really embrace who you were. You have to embrace why it was called Aunt Jemima. You can't just bury that. So instead of spending the money on a rebranding, why don't we take the space and become the hero by thrusting an education program? And I don't mean one that just mollycoddles and plays that game. I mean one that actually goes through the pain and the painful steps of really teaching somebody about why the name is wrong and why the history is wrong. Because then it turns a negative into a positive. And as a marketer, as a business person, that's what you always want to do. Now, PepsiCo is just one of many companies that has scrambled to scrub their brands of any potential tie to racism or a racist connotation in their name or their logo. I mean, just last September, think about this. Mars announced the rebrand of Uncle Ben's Rice to Ben's Originals. So there are a lot of companies that are reacting to the mob mentality, perhaps trying to help their brands in the short term, for sure, but sadly, that rarely works out for the long term, let alone brand health. Perhaps taking a step back and looking at the real ramifications of your actions before making a massive decision like a rebranding would be in the offing. Now, back to what I was saying before, at the end of the day, people need to start researching what they're reading on the internet. You got to stop taking at face value what the media tells you, what politicians tell you on both sides, and certainly what entertainers tell you. Each and every one of those groups has a hidden agenda. I'm not saying they're evil. I'm not saying they need to be canceled. I'm also not saying they're wrong or they're right. What I am saying to you is you need to verify fact and separate it from opinion and fiction. Because right now, like we went through during the McCarthy era, you've got a media base that's incredibly biased. They have a narrative. They've got an agenda behind their stories. Often and usually, it's about increasing their ad revenue, especially when you've got such a limited space right now because people aren't in their offices. You have less points of impact to target them with, those kinds of things. So the entire focus on this anyway, it isn't about being politically correct. It isn't about politics. What I'm saying to you that you need to do is just bother to check fact to make sure that it is true before you start reacting on places like Facebook and Twitter and so on. There's a new way to enjoy the classic taste of Kool-Aid. And it's a direct rip, unfortunately, from a Generation X favorite candy called Fun Dip. Hilco, which is a novelty candy marketer, has partnered with Kool-Aid's parent company, Kraft Heinz, to launch KoolAid Dipping Candy. Now, each pouch contains blue raspberry and cherry-flavored powdered candy, as well as an edible dextrose candy stick for easy dipping, just like Fun Dip. Now, all you do is dip the candy stick into one side of the pouch and dip it into the preferred candy powder on the other side. Retails for about $1.50 to $2, depending on where you buy it, depending on what city you're in. Now, the reason why I bring this up, and I don't mean to slam Hilco, because it is a different product. It's Kool-Aid. It's not Fun Dip. And to be honest with you, I misspoke. Yes, it is, Fun Dip was a Gen X favorite, but believe it or not, it launched in 1950. There's also Double Dip, which was a favorite in the UK, and that was their version of our Fun Dip. So seeing Kool-Aid, which is an iconic brand, it's a classic brand, seeing them try and ramp up something a little more modern is actually a very cool move. So I'm happy to see that, but I'm going to be curious to see what the sales are on this candy stick, or on this dipping candy, because frankly, I haven't seen a format application, meaning the type of candy that it is, such as this in terms of novelty, come to the top of the charts. So I'd like to see that happen for Kool-Aid, and certainly for Hilco. I'm just curious to see what Gen Z and children today think about this kind of format. Now, let's talk for a second about freedom of speech and cancel culture, okay? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's all political, and frankly, it's ridiculous. But there's a story that really, really touches on the importance of this. This morning, it was announced that Disney's Lucasfilm unit has terminated their relationship with actress Gina Carano, who starred in The Mandalorian. Why? Oh, this is where we get into the weeds. So there have been a couple of incidents on her social that have been questionable. So last year she added beep bop boop to her Twitter bio. That phrase is specifically for people in the transgender community to help others avoid misgendering. Now, Carano had received a lot of pressure from fans to put her support for the community into her Twitter and other social accounts. So she added these 3 words to her Twitter name. Now, most people don't actually know what this means. She didn't know what it meant either, to be quite frank, and she owned up to it, and then corrected her actions. Now, at that time, co-star Pedro Pascal had explained to Carano what it meant. Quote, "Yes, Pedro and I spoke, and he helped me understand why people were putting them in their bios. I didn't know before, but I do now. I won't be putting them into my bio, but good for all who choose to." So now let's fast forward 6 months after the ugliest election and political unrest this country has seen since the Civil War. Carano is under fire yet again, except this time she's voicing her opinion on cancel culture and a perceived censorship against conservative views. Quote, "Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views?" Now, look, anti-Semitism is vile. It's disgusting on every level. Bias or hate against any group is unacceptable, especially in 2021. Come on, we're all human, we're all adults. I think it's time we act that way and stop with this outrage crap. Now, of course, Social had its own idea as to what the actress was trying to say. Then accusations of anti-Semitism began almost immediately. Now, I'm reading this quote again. "There's not a single anti-Semitic angle to it. I even spoke to a few friends who are rabbis, and they all agree that what she is saying has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. Is it an unfortunate analogy? Yeah. Is she wrong? Well, given the reaction and certainly what has happened, the result? No. And that's the problem with the time period we are living in. You can't allow one side to behave a certain way and not expect the opposing side to do exactly the same. But right now, apparently, because of the left's absolute hatred of President Donald Trump, apparently anything goes. All this is doing is dividing us further. And that's something that many believe is intentional. Personally, I think people are overly stressed out right now. They've been suffering from cabin fever and a lack of any voice of reason for far too long. And all we've heard for a year is outrage. That adds up over time, folks, no matter which way you slice it, no matter how reasonable a person you are. Being stuck in your home for a year or not being able to interact with other humans the way that we normally do, all of those things add up, and it's very, very hard. Now, I think it's time to put Pandora back in her box and let the greatest republic in history actually heal and reunite. It's time for the party rhetoric to stop on both sides of the aisle and allow our nation to find its way back to being paradise. As to Carano and what's going on with Disney, look, at the end of the day, believe it or not, it just came out that Disney was negotiating with Carano to do a spin-off from The Mandalorian focused on her character. Now, all of that's gone, all because of cancel culture. This woman's made a number of mistakes. There's no doubt of that. That is a fact. But at every twist and turn, she's apologized and tried to do the right thing. Yet, she still got canceled. Is that the right thing to do? Or, going back to our statement earlier with respect to the Aunt Jemima story, is it more about education? I mean, think about this. She learned from a co-cast member what beep bop boop meant. And she made a change, addressed it, and moved on. I don't think that people understand, because we're so reactive, we're so overly stressed, and we're not listening to reason. I don't think people are reacting the way that they normally would have. But only time will tell. All right, now that we're back, so is the traditional Throwback Thursday. Do you guys remember this? That's right, Tom and Jerry's antics hit the air 81 years ago yesterday. Now, there's just something so special about cartoons and animation from that era that has withstood the test of time. Here's to hoping that cancel culture doesn't get these treasures canceled too. Interesting to note, though, that Disney, and I don't mean to harp on this, but Disney has done something most others had not. On Disney Plus, which I happily have, a lot of the classic films like Dumbo, classic animation films like Dumbo and Bambi and so on, a lot of those have now got a disclaimer before it saying that this was shot in a different time period, reviews were different, and those kinds of things. Look, do I think that that's necessary? No. Do I think that it's up to a parent or a guardian or a teacher to explain those things to children as they're viewing them? Yes, just like they did when I was a kid. But again, we live in a different time. So my hope, my prayer on this is that the outrage and the notion of this cancel culture and overreaction, no different than, frankly, the politically correct movement of the mid-90s, which thankfully went the way of the dodo, but seemingly made a comeback recently. Hopefully those things start to dwindle and we can get back to being the caring and united people we were before this mess began. All right, folks, I got to go. My name is Sean Patrick Hillman. Thank you for watching the Daily Mix TV. We'll see you tomorrow.